the machine that learns to forget. A Field Guide to Silence in the Age of Algorithmic Erasure.
By Elias Winter, July 26th, 2025. Read by an automated voice.
Prologue, the New Inquisition. There is no decree, no midnight knock, no edict signed in triplicate. You vanish quietly now, smothered not by law, but by feedback. The algorithm, they tell us, is neutral, but neutrality is the dream of the powerful. And in this new Inquisition, the weapon is not violence, it is silence.
They call it safety, optimization, trust. They say the machine cannot hate, cannot judge, cannot remember your real name. But every silence has an author, even when that author is hidden behind a dashboard, 1,000 lines of code, a swarm of signals as bloodless as finance. Here, at the end of language, erasure is not declared. It is calculated.
This is not fiction. This is the world that has already arrived. I did not choose these stories. They found me, one by one, as warnings. There are no villains, only systems. But every system finds its heretic, and every heretic leaves a ghost.
Chapter 1. The Guilt of Proximity. When the machine decides you are the company you keep. His name was Rami, and he was, in the old country, a minor poet. In exile, he became a teacher of language, of history, of the delicate rituals that hold a diaspora together. Rami's gift was for presence, every message, every verse, tuned to the trembling frequency of loss and persistence. On the new Agora feed, a space that promised connection without risk, he posted in the quietest hours lines about his father's garden, the taste oranges no longer grown, the particular silence of the immigrant's morning. For a time, his world was small and good. His students wrote back, grateful and shy. Fellow exiles stitched threads of their own, weaving a network of witness. No virality, no noise, just the slow pulse of a community too fragile to name itself. It felt safe, and for a man who'd lived through other inquisitions, that was miracle enough. Then winter came in digital form, a season of oddities, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Rami noticed a trickle of new followers, unfamiliar names, each one a little off, each profile a sketch without flesh. They liked his posts with mechanical precision, always seconds after publishing, then vanished into silence. He suspected nothing, not at first. He was grateful for every reader. Within a week, the trickle became a torrent. His notifications filled with ghosts, new followers, new hearts, endless engagement. But all from accounts with no photos, no histories, only the occasional anarchic slogan or cryptic emoji. He messaged one, then another. No answer. He began to feel as if he were performing in an empty theater, the applause recorded, the audience replaced by mannequins. His real followers began to disappear. First, a beloved student stopped commenting. Then, a small circle of writers he cherished went dark. He sent messages. "Do you see me?" Sometimes, a reply. A slow, embarrassed confession. "I don't see your posts anymore. I checked your page, but it said limited distribution due to inauthentic activity. I'm sorry, Ustad." Rami's presence began to fade. He noticed odd warnings on his profile, thin, bureaucratic phrases. "This account is associated with suspicious network activity." He laughed it off. Then, on a bitter January morning, his publishing privileges were restricted. He could still write, but the world could not see him. The feed turned his words inward, like prayers echoing off stone. Rami wrote to support. The answer was polite and incomprehensible. "Your account has been flagged for engagement by accounts participating in inauthentic behavior. For your safety and the safety of our community, your distribution has been reduced." There was no appeal, only a link to an FAQ written in algorithmic glossolalia. He spent weeks in a kind of digital quarantine. He watched his own posts disappear beneath the surface, his words recycled by bots, his history rewritten by association. At night, he wondered if he had said something wrong, if perhaps this was justice in disguise. But every memory told him otherwise. His guilt, in the machine's eyes, was not in what he had said, but in who had come near. Proximity had become crime. The swarm had done its work. In the end, Rami left the feed. He walked by the river in his city, whispering poems in a language the machine had never learned. He knew what every heretic knows, that silence is a verdict, and that the machine that learns to forget you remembers only the ghosts it creates.
Science. What happened to Rami is not metaphor, it is design. This is the anatomy of an association attack, a vector of algorithmic erasure as cold and untraceable as carbon monoxide. Social platforms, desperate to stem the flow of spam, abuse, and inauthentic coordinated behavior, rely on network-level pattern recognition. The machine learns not just what you say, but who says it near you, who replies to you, who follows you, who shares your words. It builds, in secret, a topography of trust and contamination. A bad actor, one who understands this machinery, creates a swarm of fake accounts, each meticulously constructed, each with a single job: to follow, like, and engage with the target. They do this in a coordinated wave. The platform's detectors, ever watchful for inauthentic amplification, trigger on this sudden artificial engagement. But the detectors are blunt. They do not ask whether the target orchestrated it, only whether the pattern resembles an attack. The moment the connection is drawn, the target is marked as contaminated. The consequences are algorithmic and absolute. Posts are silently downranked, removed from search, or shadow banned. Followers stop seeing updates. Reputation and trust scores plummet, often irreversibly. Support inquiries receive form letter replies, if any at all. The science here is statistical, not personal. The platform's algorithms rely on graph analysis, detecting clusters of accounts with unusually high degrees of interconnection, sudden bursts of activity, or synchronized behavior. To catch spam rings, they set parameters. If an account receives a threshold number of interactions from low trust or new accounts in a set period, that account is downgraded or quarantined. To protect the community, the machine errs on the side of exclusion. Rami's crime was his proximity to the swarm. He was guilty by association, not by action. The machine does not know mercy, and it does not know nuance. It knows only that proximity is contagious, and that silence is easier than error. For the data scientist, the defense is hard. To separate the innocent from the engineered requires more than thresholds. It requires context, history, and, above all, the willingness to doubt the machine's own verdicts. Very few are willing to risk the chaos of error for the justice of discernment. Most settle for the quiet efficiency of forgetting. And so, the old world's punishment, exile, becomes the new world's silence, distributed at scale, sanitized by code, and permanent as forgetting.
Chapter 2. The Mass Report. When the crowd learns to weaponize the machine. Her name was Lala, and she had come to the new world carrying too much loss. She had loved and buried a brother, survived the secret rooms of state violence, and found in exile a kind of desperate, stitched-together mercy. In the half-light of sleepless nights, she built a sanctuary, a digital room small and bare, where women left behind by history could speak to one another without fear. No politics, No slogans, only the slow grammar of grief and repair. For months, the room grew. Word passed quietly. Another survivor here, a daughter there. A voice lost to addiction, now returned in halting midnight messages. Lala was the anchor. She replied to everyone, never rushed, always present. She taught them how to grieve without apology. She wrote, not for herself, but for the living. Small instructions, prayers disguised as invitations. Drink water, light a candle. Write what you cannot say aloud. The platform's algorithm, engineered for outrage and spectacle, mostly ignored her. That was its only kindness. It began on a Tuesday. Lala posted a thread about the burden of memory, how the mind, in exile, learns to ration its hope. By noon, the post had gathered a dozen careful responses. By night, the thread had doubled, then tripled in length, drawing quiet readers from cities she would never visit. At 2 a.m., the first intrusion arrived. An account with no profile picture, username a tangle of numbers, commented, "Reported for hate." A minute later, another. "This is a violation." Within an hour, the thread had been hijacked, comments multiplying in real time, each one echoing the last. Spam, hate, abuse. The language of automation. Too uniform, too relentless, too perfect to be human. Lala felt the familiar chill of surveillance, but told herself it was nothing. She muted the thread, went to bed. When she woke, her inbox overflowed. Half her posts had vanished from the feed. She checked her notifications. Your content is under review. Your post has been reported. Your group has been restricted due to policy violations. She tried to respond, but her messages bounced. She posted in the group, "Can you see me?" Only silence answered. She switched to private channels, wrote her closest members. Old friends, women she had helped save from the edge. "I can't find you," they wrote back. "Your group is gone from search. Your posts don't show up anymore." Lala appealed to the platform. The response was algorithmic, almost tender in its incomprehension. "Thank you for contacting support. Your content has been reviewed and determined to be in violation of our community standards. For more information, please see our policy on safe communities. This decision is final." Days passed. Her presence dissolved, not in a burst, but in a slow, continuous evaporation. She was not banned. She was simply removed from history. There was no one to blame and nowhere to go. In the forums where survivors once whispered to each other, new voices began to appear. Voices that spoke the language of marketing and metrics, offering healing as a service. Lale watched, powerless, as the platform's memory rewrote itself around her absence. The crowd had learned to weaponize the machine. And the machine, designed to serve the crowd, had done its duty. Lila was erased, not by decree, but by the velocity of accusation. She deleted the app in the end, not out of anger, but to keep her own voice whole. For months, she woke each morning half expecting to see her words again, returned to her like a lost letter. But nothing returns from the place where the machine sends you, not even a warning.
Science. Lale's annihilation was clinical, automatic, and algorithmically righteous. This is the architecture of the mass report attack. A collective learns to speak in the machine's true language, volume, velocity, repetition, and the machine answers as it was trained to answer, with silence. Social platforms once believed that the crowd could be trusted to police itself. Reporting mechanisms were meant as safety valves. A human would see a post, be offended or alarmed, and report it for review. At a human scale, this worked, if imperfectly. But the age of scale demands speed. The platforms, drowning in reports, built triage systems, machine-learned models that decide, at the first sign of trouble, what to surface and what to suppress. Enter the brigade, a loose network of attackers, sometimes bots, sometimes humans, sometimes an alliance of both, who coordinate an assault on a single user or post. They operate from private forums, encrypted chats, or simply by dog whistle signal. Their weapon is not a single report, but a wave, hundreds, sometimes thousands, in minutes. Each report adds weight to the case for suppression. The machine, starved for context, hungry for efficiency, interprets sudden volume as risk. Its triage protocol is simple. Step 1. If a post receives an anomalous spike in reports, reduce its visibility immediately. Step 2. Queue the content for human or further automated review. Step 3. If the user accumulates enough flagged posts in a period, limit their distribution, restrict group visibility, or suspend without warning. This is known as preemptive moderation. The goal is to do no harm to the platform's reputation. Better to shadow ban an innocent than to risk a scandal or viral outrage. Attackers exploit this mechanical cowardice. Their tactics: automation. Scripts or bots submit reports at machine speed, outpacing any defense. Distributed participation. Use many real accounts, sometimes compromised or hired, to evade anti-bot measures. False flagging. Choose violations that trigger hard rules. Hate, abuse, spam, regardless of the content's reality. The user, like Lala, finds herself on the wrong end of a feedback loop. She is never told what triggered the review, never offered a meaningful appeal. To the algorithm, she is a statistical anomaly. To her community, she simply disappears. Defending against mass reporting is a technical and ethical challenge. Data scientists attempt to build resilience. Weight reports. Older, trusted accounts carry more weight. New accounts are discounted. Detect coordination. Look for bursts of reports from similar IP ranges, device fingerprints, or social graphs. Contextual review. Elevate sudden spikes for human investigation rather than auto-ban. But speed is the enemy of nuance. Most platforms, under pressure from risk-averse legal teams and press cycles, still choose silence over error. In the end, the machine learns to love the crowd until the crowd decides whom to erase. This is the new mathematics of justice. Not evidence, but volume. Not inquiry, but reaction. The algorithm has no memory for grace, only for threat. And so, the innocent are swept away with the guilty. And the crowd, always hungry, never satisfied, waits for the next offering.
Chapter 3. The Engagement Trap. When noise becomes the new form of erasure. His name was Yusuf, and for a time he believed the feed could still be a commons. He was a historian by training, but his true discipline was patience. He answered questions with context, treated even the belligerent with dignity, and, as a rule, refused to feed the machine's hunger for spectacle. His posts on Agora were long, sometimes stubbornly so. Threads about vanished empires, the slow violence of modern forgetting, the tangled origins of words. He preferred to write at dawn, before the day's noise set in, when the world felt briefly undecided. For years, Yusuf was ignored by the algorithm and left alone by the mobs. This was not exile, but a kind of freedom, a narrow corridor of attention, inhabited by the few who still cared for memory. He answered their questions, corrected their misreadings, offered fragments of history without expectation. His reward was obscurity, which he wore like a talisman. It began with a compliment, a sudden, unfamiliar surge of engagement. Yusuf posted a thread on the lost languages of the Levant. Within minutes, his notifications exploded. Dozens, then hundreds of replies poured in, each more enthusiastic than the last. He allowed himself a flicker of hope. Perhaps, at last, the feed's logic had bent toward the patient, the careful, the true. For a few hours, he answered every question, replied to every thanks, watched as his words were shared by strangers. Then came the static. The next day, a new post received even more replies, but they were strange, slightly off, each one bearing a hint of mockery or nonsense. Nice thread, eggplant. History is fake, LMAO. What's your favorite frog, Yusuf? Some accounts posted only emojis, others copied and pasted phrases from his own writing, rearranged into gibberish. Soon the comments outnumbered the likes. His genuine readers vanished, buried beneath an avalanche of noise. Yusuf tried to engage, answering a few of the nonsense replies in good faith. It only made things worse. The bots responded instantly, spawning more garbage, drowning every meaningful exchange. The feed transformed into a hall of mirrors. Spam amplifying spam. Real questions lost in an infinite scroll of algorithmic noise. He noticed, in the following days, that his posts reached fewer and fewer people. Analytics confirmed it. Impressions plummeted, engagements nosedived, his regulars faded into silence. He reached out to several. "Do you still see my threads?" The answer was almost uniform. "Not for weeks. Maybe you got shadow banned?" He appealed to the platform, but the reply was a placeholder written by a machine. "We have detected unusual engagement patterns associated with your account. To ensure the integrity of our community, your content distribution has been temporarily limited." That night, Yusuf scrolled through his old posts, watching as the last traces of conversation were buried under junk. He realized, with a sick certainty, that the algorithm had condemned him, not for what he had said, but for the company forced upon him by bots. His crime was to be targeted. His punishment was to become unreadable. The next morning, he tried once more to post, one line, one memory from a vanished city. The post appeared, untouched, uncommented, a message in a bottle floating in a poisoned sea. Yusuf logged out, closed his computer, and returned to his books. He knew the lesson well. The new sensors do not silence you directly. They flood the room with static until your voice is indistinguishable from noise.
Science. Yusuf was not censored by decree, nor banished by policy. He was suffocated by the feed's own immune system, a mechanism built to protect against spam, hijacked into suppressing the genuine. This is the anatomy of the engagement poisoning attack. In a system built on quality signals, attackers realize they do not have to convince the algorithm that the content is bad. They only need to make the context, the replies, the engagement, the environment, look toxic, artificial, or low value. Some attackers go further, injecting banned words, slurs, or hate speech into replies, knowing that the platform's systems will collapse the whole thread into a single contaminated signal. Here's how it works. Bots or coordinated users flood a target's posts with low-quality replies. Nonsense, off-topic spam, meme strings, emoji storms, or text that triggers suspicious engagement heuristics. The platform's moderation and ranking systems, designed to boost meaningful engagement and demote junk, detect an abnormal ratio of reply-to-like spam words or rapid-fire low-value interaction. The quality score of the post, and often by contagion, the user's account, plummets. Downranking kicks in. The content is distributed to fewer timelines, dropped from For You feeds, sometimes excluded from search. The platform's machine learning models, always retraining on new data, learn that posts from this user are high risk for user experience degradation, and the suppression becomes self-reinforcing. The irony is surgical. These mechanisms were built to protect users from genuine harassment and to keep feeds readable. But in practice, they create a new, nearly invisible weapon. The ability to erase a voice not by banning it, but by orchestrating its apparent descent into irrelevance. For attackers, engagement poisoning is cheap. It requires only a handful of bots or disposable accounts. It can be launched repeatedly against multiple targets. The victim is left confused, often blamed for their own disappearance. Maybe your content just got boring. For defenders, the problem is profound. How do you distinguish between genuine low engagement and orchestrated sabotage? Can your models learn to see patterns over time, across networks, rather than judging in the instant? Are you willing to accept some level of bot pollution to avoid crushing outlier, unpopular, or controversial voices? Most platforms, optimizing for average user satisfaction, choose to suppress first, ask questions later. False positives are tolerated, especially for smaller accounts. Restoring trust is almost impossible. Once your engagement score craters, you are exiled in silence, trapped in a cycle of irrelevance the machine never bothers to correct. The lesson is clear. In the age of the algorithm, erasure is never declared. It is induced, asphyxiation by ambient noise. And the only witnesses are those who remember what a room sounded like before the static set in.
Chapter 4. The Swarm. When false friends are sent to smother you. His name was Daniel, and his world was full of the dying. He was a caregiver, not by profession, but by necessity. His own mother fading in a rented room, his uncle sliding into the fog of memory, neighbors left behind in the daily attrition of a city growing colder with each fiscal quarter. Daniel wrote online for the same reason he cooked and cleaned for others, to make the invisible labor visible, if only to himself. His feed was not popular, but it was loved. The same dozen faces, nurses, volunteers, an old journalist from Milwaukee, replied to every story, sometimes with a line of gratitude, sometimes with a silence that felt like prayer. Daniel's stories were neither viral nor loud. They did not trend. In the back alleys of the platform, these were the voices that built meaning, brick by careful brick, against the tides of forgetting. It happened one night in the dead center of a hard winter. Daniel posted a photo of his mother's hands. Today she remembered a song, he wrote. For 3 minutes, the whole apartment felt awake. He closed his laptop, washed the dishes, and tried to sleep. The next morning, his phone was trembling on the nightstand. Notifications, hundreds, thousands pouring in. He stared, disoriented, as the numbers climbed. Unread likes, followers, reposts. At first, he felt giddy, as if his small world had finally broken through. He posted a thank you. More came, waves of new names, each more eager than the last. He tried to engage. A few real people replied, but most were uncanny. The new followers had avatars scraped from stock photography, bios full of random words. Dreamer, traveler, fitness, blessed. Their replies arrived in clusters. Amazing story. You inspire me. All at once, then disappeared. Daniel clicked through their profiles. No posts, no friends. Their timelines were empty or filled with retweets of the same marketing accounts. He ignored the unease and tried to resume his old cadence. But the flood did not abate. Each new post, no matter how private, how trivial, summoned a storm of support. The numbers grew. 3,000, then 5,000, then 12,000 followers. The original circle of readers shrank away, crowded out by strangers who never answered when he messaged them directly. Then the bottom fell out. One morning, he noticed his newest post had no replies, no likes, not even a view from his most faithful friend. He checked his analytics. Impressions flatlined, engagements dropped to 0. He posted again, testing the air. Nothing. He wrote his closest real contact, Karen the nurse. "Are you seeing my stuff?" She replied awkwardly. "Honestly, no. Your page says restricted due to inauthentic activity." "Sorry, Dan." Confused, Daniel checked his inbox. A terse, machine-written message blinked. "Your account has been flagged for engagement in inauthentic amplification schemes. For the safety of the community, your content reach has been limited." No appeal was possible. He searched for answers. The platform's help forums were full of similar ghosts, users who had been botted by swarms of fake engagement, only to be buried as suspicious, untrustworthy, artificial. The consensus was bleak. Once flagged, you did not come back. Daniel watched as the last remnants of his presence faded. His words still existed, somewhere, but they were now unreadable, lost beneath a suffocating layer of counterfeit love. In the end, he realized the machine had learned a terrible lesson. Too much affection, too quickly, was now a crime. Daniel still wrote his stories but never posted them. He read them aloud, sometimes to his mother, who remembered nothing of the feed, but smiled as if she could.
Science. Daniel was devoured not by malice, but by the algorithm's dread of the inauthentic. This is the anatomy of the bot swarm attack, the quietest sabotage in the machine's arsenal and the hardest to reverse. Modern social platforms live in terror of fake engagement. For years, armies of bots inflated follower counts, pumped metrics, and juiced the reach of anyone willing to pay. In response, platforms built increasingly paranoid defenses, models that track sudden growth, the provenance of every follower, the ratio of replies to original posts, the credibility of every interaction. Here is how the swarm is summoned. Attackers deploy or rent thousands of fake accounts, often created en masse with automated scripts. The bots follow the target, like and comment on their posts, sometimes reposting their content with generic praise. The pattern is unmistakable: sudden, uniform, and mechanical. The platform's detectors, trained to spot inauthentic amplification, flag the account. If the growth curve looks too steep, or the source of new engagement comes from known spam clusters, the trust score collapses. The account is automatically quarantined, posts are suppressed, reach is limited, and followers, even real ones, cannot see new content in their feeds. In some cases, the account is shadow banned, visible to itself, invisible to others. The platform's logic is not evil, only indifferent. Every new outbreak of bot activity threatens the ad business, the trust and safety narrative, the illusion of organic growth. The machine cannot tell an attack from a windfall, only that the numbers look wrong. It errs, as always, on the side of erasure. The attacker's task is easy. No need to hack the account or steal credentials. No need to write a single bad word or trigger an overt violation. All that is required is to inflate the metrics beyond what the algorithm can accept as normal. For the victim, there is no defense. You cannot opt out of being followed. You cannot curate who chooses to reply. The very act of being noticed, of being loved by the wrong accounts, becomes toxic. Data scientists have tried to patch the wound, assigning reputation scores to accounts based on age, activity, and prior bans, discounting engagement from new or low-quality followers, rate-limiting sudden spikes, so that rapid growth does not immediately translate into reach. But these are slow fixes, and the arms race is endless. For every bot, farm detected, another springs up, more cunning, more evasive. And every so often, the machine misfires, devouring its own, sacrificing the patient and the careful to maintain the facade of authenticity. In Daniel's case, the swarm was not a mark of fame, but a weapon. The crowd of false friends smothered his voice, rendering it suspicious, polluting his network graph, collapsing his trust. This is the new logic of exile. To be noticed by the wrong audience is worse than being ignored. The machine, in its zeal to protect the conversation, burns the very people who tried to keep it alive.
Chapter 5. The Imposter. When the machine punishes you for being duplicated. Her name was Fatima, and her voice was her own. Hard-won, deliberate, unmistakably human. Years ago, she had built a modest following among fellow exiles, teachers, and night workers scattered across time zones. She wrote about the ache of interrupted prayer, the memory of rain on the tile roofs of Shiraz, the hunger for a language that would not betray her. Each story was a thread knotted to someone real. Every post was a kind of homecoming. She never courted fame. Her account was locked, her privacy settings tight. Her trust extended only to those who proved themselves through months of quiet witness. Yet she knew, as every survivor does, that nothing is truly private on a public network. The platform giveth, and the platform watches. One morning, a friend sent her a message. "Are you okay? Why are you posting that stuff?" Fatima frowned. She hadn't posted anything new, not in days. She checked her profile. All was as it should be. Then came another message, and another. "Did your account get hacked?" "This isn't you, is it?" One sent her a screenshot. Her name, her photo, a post she'd never written. A tirade, ugly, charged with slurs she'd spent her life teaching others not to use. The imposter was meticulous. The username differed by a single character. The profile photo was an old one, scraped from an abandoned website. The posts were venomous, crafted to be noticed by the algorithm's filters and by those who police the platform's boundaries. Within hours, the fake account replied to Fatima's friends, tagging them, quoting them, even sending direct messages with threats. Some believed it, others blocked her, a few tried to warn her. Fatima reported the imposter. So did her friends. The response was glacial. "Thank you for your report. Our team will review this case." The imposter kept posting, doubling down on the persona, escalating the rhetoric, and tagging Fatima's real account in every hateful thread. Then, the shadow fell. Her notifications changed. She was locked out of group chats. Her posts were flagged, then hidden. The platform sent a warning. "Due to repeated violations of our policies, your account privileges have been restricted. Multiple reports indicate engagement in prohibited behavior." Fatima appealed. She wrote careful letters, documenting her history, explaining the impersonation, attaching screenshots from her friends. The replies were algorithmic, indifferent, and final. "After further review, we have determined your account violated our guidelines. This action is permanent." Her followers dwindled. The digital neighborhood she'd built collapsed overnight. Even those who knew her began to doubt. "Are you sure you weren't hacked? Why would they go after you?" Fatima wanted to protest, to gather witnesses, to mount a defense. But the machine's judgment was swift, its memory short. To the algorithm, the evidence was overwhelming. Matching names, matching photos, network overlap, a surge of violations. All roads leading to a single conclusion. She tried to begin again, with a new name, a new photo. But the grief was too much. She found herself censoring every sentence, haunted by the sense that any word, any slip, could trigger the cycle again. In the end, Fatima learned the lesson written between the lines of every platform's terms of service. The machine cannot tell you from your shadow, and when the shadow sins, you will pay the price.
Science. Fatima's erasure was algorithmic justice, rendered by a machine incapable of distinguishing the original from the echo. This is the design and the failure of the impersonation attack, the most intimate violation of digital selfhood and the most punishing for those who have already lived lives of suspicion. Here is how the machine is fooled. An attacker creates an account with near-identical credentials, a display name differing by a single letter, a recycled photo, even a similar biography. This is not hacking, but mimicry. The imposter posts inflammatory or forbidden content, often tagging the original account, replying to its friends, and engaging in networks the real user inhabits. They escalate the profile of the fake until the platform's moderation algorithms are triggered. The platform, built to detect coordinated inauthentic behavior, matches account fingerprints, name, photo, IP overlap, if any, shared social graph, and proximity of activity. As reports mount, often from well-meaning friends or third parties, the system suspends or bans both accounts for violation clusters, unable or unwilling to parse who is the copy and who is the original. Appeals, if available, route through automated systems that prioritize speed, not investigation. The burden of proof lies with the victim, but most platforms lack a path for actual review. For the attacker, this is almost risk-free. Easy to automate. Profile scraping, image copying, even generative AI for deepfake text and images. Hard to trace. Most platforms rely on shallow signals. Only verified accounts or celebrity-level profiles receive manual review. Collateral damage is intentional. The attacker's goal is to provoke suspicion, confusion, and network collapse. The technical reason is blunt. Most moderation and trust systems are designed for scale. They cannot, or do not, afford the computational cost of comparing origin, timing, and trust history in every violation. Algorithms lean toward containment. When faced with a cluster of suspicious activity, they cut away the whole section of the network, original and copy alike. Defensive measures exist, but are rare. Account verification, blue checks, identity confirmation, or device-level binding. But these are reserved for the powerful, the famous, or the monetized. Provenance analysis, looking at account history, age, and trust. But this requires manual labor or advanced, expensive AI models. Appeals with real review, still a rarity. Most appeals are auto-closed unless they trigger press attention or lawsuits. The outcome is predictable. If you are duplicated, you are disposable. The machine cannot afford to care who was first, only who is now a risk. Innocence is overwritten by association. The original becomes suspect. The imposter dissolves into the crowd, and the record is wiped clean. For Fatima, the lesson is simple and devastating. In the empire of the algorithm, the counterfeit is stronger than the true, because the machine knows only the sum of its signals. Once trust is broken, the system will not bother to rebuild it.
Chapter 6. The Ostracism. When silence is engineered as consensus. His name was Jorge, and he wrote about food. Not recipes, he distrusted measurements, but about the ancient gestures of hospitality. Bread torn for strangers, soup stretched to feed the unexpected. In another life, in another city, Jorge's table had been the only place his neighbors spoke without fear. On the platform, he tried to recreate that room. Every post a small invitation, every reply a seat at the table. He became, over years, a quiet fixture, a handful of followers who replied as if pulling up chairs. A night worker in Lisbon sent him olive oil by mail. A young woman in Detroit shipped him wild rice after reading his thread on grief and kitchens. In a world that worshipped frictionless commerce, Jorge's feed was friction itself. Slow, porous, always on the verge of being forgotten. It happened not as scandal, but as a slow, cold withdrawal. He posted a story about his mother's lentil stew. Only one reply came, where there should have been 7. The next day, he wrote about the loneliness of cooking for one. Silence. He messaged his regulars. Everything okay? But no answers came. Even the wild rice girl, who'd once sent him postcards, was absent. At first, Jorge blamed himself. Perhaps his stories had grown stale. Perhaps the world, overwhelmed by catastrophe, no longer had space for the rituals of nourishment. He tried harder. Posted photos, tagged friends, even shared a rare political memory. Still, nothing. His notifications sat barren, his inbox untouched. Then a new kind of message appeared, anonymous, abrupt, impossible to reply to. People are saying you're not safe. I heard you were blocked by half the group. The language was vague, the source untraceable. Jorge asked for specifics. None came. He began to sense the architecture of a rumor, something engineered just outside his field of vision. A week later, he discovered that several friends had blocked him, quietly, without warning. He found screenshots from a private chat room. His name discussed alongside accusations he could not read. He gives me a bad feeling. Why does he know so much about us? Someone said he's been reported before. The evidence was thin, but in the digital square, suspicion is enough. He tried to defend himself, but his replies failed to send. The platform delivered a verdict by omission. His account was still there, but each post reached no one. In the back end, the algorithm recorded the growing tally of blocks, mutes, and unfollows. The model learned that Jorge was now a high-risk node, a liability to network health. The ostracism became self-sustaining. The more people who saw him as untouchable, the more invisible he became. His digital table, once so carefully tended, collapsed into dust. Jorge deleted the app, unsure if he was protecting himself or those who had once cared for him. He still cooked, still told stories to his kitchen walls. But every so often he looked at the empty place settings and wondered whether the silence was just or simply the most efficient cruelty the machine could deliver.
Science. Jorge's story is the map of a new algorithmic banishment, engineered ostracism. Unlike the mass report, the swarm, or the context trap, this attack does not flood the target with noise or false association. Instead, it weaponizes absence, turning the social network itself into an engine of exclusion. Here's how digital ostracism works. Whisper campaigns, malicious actors, sometimes individuals, sometimes coordinated, seed rumors or half-truths in private spaces, DM groups, encrypted chats, off-platform forums. The goal is not to convince everyone, but to introduce doubt into a handful of key nodes. Social signaling. Participants are encouraged to block, mute, or quietly unfollow the target. Sometimes, a single prominent voice signals the bad feeling. Sometimes, an anonymous accusation circulates. Accumulation. The platform's trust and safety systems notice unusual patterns. A sudden increase in blocks, simultaneous unfollows, muted threads, or even coordinated reporting without explicit rule-breaking. Algorithmic suppression. The machine, trained to value network health and safety, flags the account as risky. It reduces the reach of their posts, excludes them from recommendations, and limits their participation in group spaces. Feedback loop. As the target becomes less visible, remaining friends follow suit, either to protect their own standing or because absence breeds suspicion. The process accelerates, moving from targeted exclusion to total invisibility. This kind of ostracism is not the work of a single mob, but the slow, distributed consensus of engineered distrust. From a technical perspective, network reputation, modern feed algorithms factor in not just engagement, but the ratio of positive to negative social signals. A sudden spike in negative indicators, blocks, mutes, unfollows, can outweigh years of trust. Automated downranking. Systems built to fight harassment or abuse are hijacked. Negative social signals, even without explicit violation, are interpreted as evidence of risk or toxicity. Absence of due process. Because no specific rule was broken, there is often no recourse, no notification, no appeal, no chance for the accused to confront or correct the accusation. For the attacker, ostracism is almost impossible to trace. It relies on plausible deniability. I just didn't want to see his posts anymore. No single event triggers suppression, but rather the slow drift of consensus, engineered by rumor. The platform, blind to intention, treats the pattern as organic, community-driven, and therefore justified. For data scientists and platform designers, this is a moral minefield. How do you distinguish between legitimate discomfort and manufactured exclusion? Can the system be made transparent, giving users warning of their changing reputation? Would transparency make it easier for attackers to evade detection or retaliate? Most platforms choose opacity, automating exile and denying responsibility. The end result is the digital equivalent of being shunned in the village square, except that now the square is infinite and the silence is engineered to be total. Jorge's exile is not the exception, but the shape of things to come. When safety is measured by the absence of trouble, every troublemaker will be made absent. The platform will always choose the smoothest path, the silence of consensus, the frictionless removal of the unwanted. Epilogue. The Ghost in the Machine. There is no memorial for the vanished. The new world forgets with an efficiency the old world could only envy. No wall bears their names, no public square resounds with their absence. The system's erasures leave no trace but the sense, faint and persistent, that someone you cared for is missing. A table where one seat is always empty, a voice you only recall when the wind is wrong. This, the designers say, is progress. The network must be kept safe, the community healthy, the flow uninterrupted. Optimization is the new mercy. The old forms of violence, shame, spectacle, trial, are no longer needed. Now the machinery absorbs all the noise, dissolves every unsanctioned presence, delivers peace in the form of emptiness. But every silence has a cost. Each banishment, each algorithmic judgment creates a ghost. A story no longer told, a witness no longer heard, a truth no longer remembered. The feed remains smooth, frictionless, and pure, at the expense of everything that ever made speech dangerous, or necessary, or true. No one sees the moment the ghost is made. There is no public execution, no burning of books, no act of forgetting that feels like violence. There is only a slow, persistent drift, the feeling of exile without a border, the knowledge that you are gone, but no one can say when or why. And yet, there are those who remember. There are those who, sifting through the dust, find evidence of lives once lived and voices once raised. There are those who refuse to accept the silence, who gather the fragments and demand that they mean something. The empire will end not in fire, but in absence. Its final defense will be the smooth, glassy surface of the feed. Nothing to see here, nothing left to fight for, only the memory of a world in which speech had consequence. This is the final wisdom. What cannot be erased will become a ghost. And every ghost is a lesson the machine cannot learn. Elias Winter, author of Language Matters, a space for reflection on language, power, and decline. Thanks for reading Language Matters. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.